Okay, so I realize most of you guys can't see me, so this is probably a horribly bad idea. But let's see if I can make this work. Alrighty then. Okay, the very first line of the very first book of the inheritance cycle. Ready?
Yeah.
Ready? I should have stood up on this table to begin with. No, here we go. Wind howled through the night, carrying a scent that would change the world. Thank you. And who's got eldest? Pass it on up. Oh, sorry. Okay, so one of my favorite things in this series was creating the languages for the world. And I want to read you something, a piece of it. Here we go. So I created the two main languages are the elf language and the dwarf language. And the elf language I based partially on Old Norse, which I thought gave it a good sound and feel. Now I'm going to read you a blessing in the ancient language, and I have to apologize because I have an absolutely horrible Elvish accent. And that's partly because in Elvish you are supposed to roll your R's on the tip of your tongue like you would in Italian or Spanish. However, I can only roll my R's, and I apologize because this sounds horribly obscene. I can only roll my R's by wiggling my uvula. So I'm going to wiggle my uvula at you, and I hope you like it too. Alright, here we go. Sorry, that was really silly, but I couldn't resist. Okay, here we go. Atra sterniona thelduin, maralifa uninharta owner, undu everinia onovarda. But my most favorite language is actually the Dwarvish, because the Dwarvish I didn't base on anything at all, and I think it has a really great sound and feel. It's very woody. You can just sink your teeth into it. So, and I actually have an excellent Dwarvish accent, mainly because in Dwarvish you are supposed to wiggle your uvula. So, let the wiggling commence. Born Rethkarach, born Jürgen Karmeter, nos et a gorf bastarnag durin sesti rek kiffen. Yok is worth as Barzulagur, durgrimst as Schwelden rak anuin, Moog Tor Rak Jürgenvran. Thank you. Now, as you might have noticed, Book 3, Brissinger, is a rather large book. My editor informed me of this on several occasions. And it has lots of sentences in it, as large books usually do. And among many of these sentences are some that I'm particularly fond of, one of which involves a bombulating bumblebee, which I probably should have cut, but I just couldn't. In any case, out of this whole giant book and all of these long sentences, there's one in particular I want to read you. It's my very favorite sentence out of the whole book. Assuming I can find it. All right, here we go. You guys ready? My favorite sentence. You want to hear it? Yeah? Die, puny human! I mean, really, what is the point of writing fantasy if you can't write lines like, die, puny human, every now and then? Okay, and lastly, but hopefully not the least, this is from the very end of the first chapter of the last book. And for those of you who haven't read the first book or haven't read the fourth book, this doesn't have any spoilers in it, so you don't have to worry about covering your ears. Well, not any big spoilers, so. Okay, here we go. Hope you like it. The sound was stabbing, slicing, shivering, like metals scraping against stone. Eragon's teeth vibrated in sympathy, and he covered his ears with his hands, grimacing as he twisted around, trying to locate the source of the noise. Saphira tossed her head and even through the din, he heard her whine in distress. Eragon swept his gaze over the courtyard 2 separate times before he noticed a faint puff of dust rising up the wall of the keep from a foot-wide crack that had appeared beneath the blackened, partially destroyed window where Bloodgarm had killed the magician. As the squeal increased in intensity, Eragon risked lifting one of his hands off his ears to point at the crack. "Look!" he shouted to Arya, who nodded in acknowledgement. He replaced his hand over his ear. Without warning or preamble, the sound stopped. Eragon waited for a moment, then slowly lowered his hands, for once wishing that his hearing was not quite so sensitive. Just as he did, the crack jerked open wider, spreading until it was several feet across, and raced down the wall of the keep. Like a bolt of lightning, the crack struck and shattered the keystone above the door to the keep, showering the floor below with pebbles. The whole castle groaned, and from the damaged window to the broken keystone, the front of the keep began to lean outward. "Run!" Eragon shouted at the Varden, though the men were already scattering to either side of the courtyard, desperate to get out from under the precarious wall. Eragon took a single step forward, every muscle in his body tense, as he searched for a glimpse of Rorin somewhere in the throng of warriors. At last, Eragon spotted him, trapped behind the last group of men by the doorway, bellowing madly at them, his words lost in the commotion. Then the wall shifted and dropped several inches, leaning even further away from the rest of the building, pelting Rorin with rocks, knocking him off balance, and forcing him to stumble backward under the overhang of the doorway. As Rorin straightened from a crouch, his eyes met Eragon's, and in his gaze, Eragon saw a flash of fear and helplessness, quickly followed by resignation, as if Rorin knew that no matter how fast he ran, he could not possibly reach safety in time. A wry smile touched Rorin's lips, and the wall fell. Does he live? Does he die? Read chapter 2. Before we go to the signing, I'd love to answer a few of your questions fairly briefly, because there are